with Rachel Vigil, taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel Vigil.
I did not expect to wake up on a Friday morning and see... yeah. First of all, we all should be tired. I'm tired. I ended up going to Morgan Wallen concert last night. I didn't get home till 1:40 a.m. because of the rain delay. But I did not expect to wake up and see Klay Thompson being connected to the Denver Nuggets if they do not re-sign KCP. Like, Jake, this just feels so odd. And maybe it's because I never expected to see Klay Thompson with anybody else besides the Golden State Warriors, even though, of course, we heard all the rumors all season long that it was going to be the end of the trio out there. Just him leaving and being in a Nuggets uniform doesn't sit right with me. Am I the only one in the room about feeling that way?
Well, Rachel, I think we both remember how the Golden State Warriors dynasty started, which is with a playoff victory over the Denver Nuggets, which essentially ended the George Karl, Danilo Gallinari era. So the Golden State Warriors have been the Denver Nuggets enemy, whether they know it or not. At least here, we felt like the Warriors have been the enemy for almost a decade now. So to have that guy come here doesn't feel all that great. What I will say is it's not Draymond, who we obviously do not like, and it's not Steph, who's the star player. Klay, I've always kind of liked his personality and I've liked his play style. So it's a little bit more palatable. But in the same sense, Rachel, no, I was completely shocked by that report. And frankly, I don't believe it. We can get into that in a second because the Nuggets don't have any salary cap space. So how are they signing Klay Thompson? How is this going to happen?
Fair. Okay, so then it brings up the point that everybody's asking of like, okay, well then why can they go sign KCP to whatever money he wants, but why can't they bring in a player like Klay Thompson? But that's because the Nuggets can match KCP's contract offers, correct?
They could do more than match. He's an unrestricted free agent, but they could do more than match. KCP, because he was, I think, drafted by the Pistons, traded to the Lakers, traded to the Wizards, and then traded to the Nuggets. Essentially, the NBA counts that as you've been serving with one team the whole time. You have not signed a free agency deal. So the Denver Nuggets own this thing called his bird rights, which means you can go over the salary cap, you can go over the tax, you can sign KCP if you wanted to a similar deal to the Nuggets are trying to give Jamal Murray right now. They could give him a max contract, whereas the Denver Nuggets have in free agency, depending on how KCP plays out, either $5 million to give one player or $2 million to give a couple players each. So the Denver Nuggets can re-sign KCP to just about anything, just as if they were drafting Michael Porter Jr. and continued to re-sign him. Whereas Klay Thompson, he's signing a free agency deal with cap space, and the Nuggets do not have cap space.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like a weird time right now to be paying attention to the Nuggets. And I feel like typically not a lot of people are, so invested in the numbers and what's going on. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, okay, we hear about it, we see it. But because we're in this championship window, it feels like everybody is connected to like, okay, what can they actually do to hopefully get another ring after the disappointing season that we had this year?
Yeah, and I think there's good reason for that because this offseason is hugely essential. I'm not going to be the guy that calls it the most important offseason in Nuggets history. I don't know where it would rank, but it's a hugely important offseason because the Nuggets do need to do some retooling and rebuilding around Nikola Jokic. And they seem to have doubled down on the idea of Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, which you can't fault them for. They've won one championship already by giving Jamal Murray that extension yesterday or working towards it at least. And then you look around what the Nuggets are trying to do, and the NBA is extremely complicated, especially so with the newer rules, and no one knows exactly how everything is going to work with those new rules and the strategies that apply to those new rules. Yeah. So, you understand why people are really interested in how the Nuggets are going to build their team, especially when people are very connected to some of the players on this team because they won the Nuggets their first championship. So this is a great time to be a Nuggets fan. They've got a 3-time MVP. This is never going to happen again. And it's really fun. It is really fun to be following this, but it's also a really complicated time. And the Nuggets have a lot of problems, some of them really good problems because they have good players.
True. Okay, so now the obvious question is, does Klay Thompson even fit the scheme that the Nuggets is going or trying to run, what they can do to hopefully do another championship? Like, obviously KCP is known for his defensive ratings and everything. And we believe it was like 111 on the year was his defensive rating every time he was on the court, which is really good. But he wasn't the offensive guru sometimes that you hoped he could be. He could drain a three if you needed him to, but Klay Thompson's obviously known for his threes as well. But what about defensively? How well is he on the defensive side of things?
I mean, Klay Thompson's a former all-defensive team player. He is one of the best two-way players in the history of the NBA. The problem is he's 34 years old. He missed 2 years of NBA basketball. And when he was at his peak, his defensive rating for his career was 110. Still is. Defensive rating for his career is 110. Last 2 years, it's been about 120, which means 10 more points per possession when he's on the floor. Sure, that has a lot to do with the fact that the Warriors are a shell of themselves at this point. I've been saying on the show that the Warriors aren't it for a couple years now. So there are some stuff there. And let's be clear, Rachel, too. Klay Thompson's a guy in the last couple of years, even off those injuries, who's getting 20 points a game, 18 points a game. KCP scores like 12 points a game. Klay Thompson's a far better scorer, even at this point in his career, but he's just not mobile like KCP. The Nuggets need that point of attack defender, the guy who can guard Steph Curry's, the guy who can guard Damian Lillard's, the guy who can guard some of these elite guards in the NBA. KCP has proven that. Can 35-year-old Klay Thompson still do that? I don't think so. So much to the point that the Warriors dropped him from the starting five last year at one point. So I don't think this is the solution. But if you're going to tell me today that the Nuggets are going to let KCP walk because it's KCP's decision at the end of the day and he's going to make an amount of money, and they open up that $5 million contract slot, and Klay Thompson's going to take a significant pay cut to leave the Warriors to join the Nuggets for $5 million, sure. That sounds good to me. That's about as good of an offseason the Nuggets could have had while losing KCP. I just don't think Klay Thompson's going to go from a guy making $40 million a year to $5 million a year over year. And I find it hard to believe the Warriors wouldn't give him a little bit more money, even if they are to the point where, we're moving on or whatever they're thinking.
Well, and it's not like Klay Thompson is, every player's chasing rings, but it's not like he's chasing his first ring and he's like desperate to try and get it. Like, he's already been a champion multiple times. I also see one of these comments. We would love to get Paul George. I have seen so many people have this conversation today as well. People are saying I would trade MPJ to bring in Paul George. Like, I've seen the craziest situations around this. I'm not on board for Paul George. Am I the only one? Is that weird?
The thing that comes to mind when I think of Paul George, Rachel, Game 7, 2020. Game on the line. Wide open corner three. Where does it go, Rachel? Off the side of the backboard.
Not in the basket.
He is one of the most overrated players of the last 5-6 years. You know what? He was awesome before his leg injury. Truly, he is one of the better players in NBA history. But his tenure with the Clippers has gone almost nowhere. In fact, the best year they had was that year Kawhi got hurt and Reggie Jackson was their starting point guard in the playoffs. So I just look at Paul George and you know what? He was an all-star the last 2 years. And he's a better player probably than the Nuggets have on their roster besides Nikola Jokic. But am I going to take 35-year-old Paul George over 26-year-old Michael Porter Jr.? I just think that's a fool's errand. I think that, and I'm the guy over here nonstop banging the drum that you need to win now. You need to prepare these moves for now. I think Michael Porter Jr. is more valuable to the Nuggets right now than Paul George would be, at least in my mind. And that's on top of the fact that you would need to trade Michael Porter Jr., likely Zeke Naji as well. I'm not sure why or how that exactly works because the reporting on this didn't actually make sense, Rachel, where it was MPJ, Zeke Naji, and considerable draft compensation to the Clippers for Paul George. The Clippers and the Nuggets are in the tax, so they can't aggregate salaries. They have to match within a certain number. So that wouldn't work. Besides the point, the Nuggets have one draft pick they can trade. It's the
2031.
Yeah. So how are they getting Paul George? They're not getting Paul George. He's not opting in agreeing to a trade, and the teams aren't going to make a trade. And this underscores the fact, by the way, that the only team, or not the only team, but the team with the most red flags on Michael Porter Jr. coming out of the draft, the team with the doctor who had the quote that Michael Porter Jr. is never going to play in the NBA, he's got so many red flags because of his back issues, was the Clippers, who passed on him twice. Their team doctor hated his medical, and it's not like they have access to his current medical. So I find it extremely hard to believe that the Clippers are going to break up their little foursome they got with the Hall of Famers for Michael Porter Jr., who they would not draft because they hated his medical so much. So this is not happening at all. In a vacuum, would Paul George be an awesome addition to the Nuggets? Yeah, he'd be a great KCP replacement. I think that's awesome. But I don't think Paul George as your second fiddle, as proved by what we've seen with the Clippers the last couple of years, is a viable path to a championship. Him as your third fiddle, sure. But I don't think the Nuggets are in a situation where they can make him the third fiddle and fit under the salary cap and make that transaction work.
See, Jake, I love having you on because when we disagree, it really freaking sucks because you end up convincing me that I should believe whatever you're saying. But then when we agree, you just give me like 100 facts of why we both agree. And it's incredible. So I love it regardless. I'm glad neither one of us are on the Paul George like bandwagon, whether or not we want him or we just know that the Nuggets can't get him. So all these rumors are going crazy. And you and I were on this show yesterday. And I said, so the Nuggets are done, right? Like there's nothing they're going to go and do in the second round. They obviously don't have any picks. Like it's going to be kind of quiet. That was all wrong yesterday because obviously we got the Jamal Murray extension. We got KCP declining his option. But we also got Reggie Jackson being moved to Charlotte. But the craziest part about that is Calvin Booth had to send 3 second-round picks along with Reggie Jackson to move him. And I'm still confused, and maybe I just missed it. What are they getting back in return? Are they just getting some more money in their cap because they shipped the guy away?
They're getting cash considerations. They don't even get cap space out of it. They're so far past the salary cap that they don't get cap space. What they do get, and this is the very negative view of this, is Kroenke Sports Entertainment, who has been viewed as very cheap ownership over the years, gets to lessen their wage bill by potentially ducking the salary luxury tax if they make a bunch of other moves with dumping Zeke Najee's salary and some other stuff. At the very least, they don't have to pay Reggie Jackson $5.5 million plus the luxury tax associated with him, which for a repeater like the Denver Nuggets, who are going to be entering their second year in a row in the luxury tax, would be probably another $2 to $3 million that they're just throwing away into a pool of money in the NBA. So they're saving themselves a lot of money. It does not make much sense that they had to trade 3 second-round picks for a guy who is just contract-wise. $5 million is not a significant NBA contract. On top of that, it is expiring at this season's end, which a lot of teams want to trade for big contracts that are expiring so they have more salary cap the next season. So it doesn't make much sense. On top of the fact that Reggie Jackson played 82 games last year and averaged 11 points a game. You know, he wasn't great, particularly in the playoffs, but he was good. And the Nuggets don't set their single season franchise win mark at 57 without Reggie Jackson on the roster last year. So he's still a capable NBA player. No, he's not a starter, but he's a backup and he played exactly what he was worth last year. So why the Nuggets had to trade 3 unprotected second round picks, not these fake second round picks that sometimes get traded, does not make much sense to me. On top of the fact, Rachel, the timing of it doesn't make much sense because if KCP is going to walk, they could have used Reggie Jackson's salary with Zeke Najee's salary to acquire a player making around $15 million. Now they can't aggregate that amount that Reggie Jackson was making with Zeke Najee for a player making $15 million. They can only trade Zeke Najee to get a player back that's making around $9 million. So they severely hampered themselves in terms of their flexibility moving forward, particularly if KCP walks away. This leads me to believe that Calvin Booth knows what's about to happen in this free agency period, whether that's they're going to be able to get KCP back, which I find unlikely. KCP is going to a team which is going to orchestrate a sign and trade the Nuggets already know or have an idea of what their return is, or simply, like I said at the start, they're really trying to lessen their wage bill. Or you could go with the fourth thing, which is Calvin Booth is going to make Michael Malone play the rookies like Jalen Pickett, who, by the way, only played 122 minutes last year and is not ready to be the backup point guard seriously on a championship level team. So I am befuddled by this move, Rachel. It does not make much sense.
So what grade are we giving Calvin Booth then over the last 48 hours? From the start of the draft to where we are right now, what grade are we giving him?
The De'Ron Holmes pick is an A+. 10 out of 10.
Totally
Home
agree.
run, grand slam. That is an awesome pick. The Jamal Murray extension, getting a guy who's of an all-star caliber to remain in Denver for his career, one of the best players the Nuggets have ever had. That is an A+. I think we all want Jamal Murray here in the long term, and obviously the Nuggets are building around Jamal and Nikola. There was never really a scenario where they were going to trade Jamal, even though some people might have felt that way in the postseason. That's our guy. Like that's our guy. So those two moves are A+. And the Jamal Murray thing is paramount because that's your star player.
Okay.
Going down the line, losing KCP and losing the asset and not getting anything back for that. That's a D.
Takes you to like a B, right? Like we'll just KCP alone. I feel like that brings you all the way down from an A+ to a B.
I would say that brings you down to probably a B+. And then moving Reggie Jackson and limiting your flexibility because of the KCP deal, that probably takes you down to a B- C+. I'm not ready to give him a final grade because there's obviously something in motion here that we don't know about yet, as evidenced by the fact that the NBA world is speculating about two of the biggest name players in the NBA over the last decade being connected to the Nuggets. So something's up here, Rachel. So when I give it a tentative B-, I'm giving Calvin Booth a wide berth. And again, I lean towards the positive side because Jamal Murray is staying here and is going to play his career here. And ultimately, if the Nuggets need to rebuild a little bit around Jamal and Nikola, those guys are signed to 5+ year deals, and they're going to have the time to rebuild around these guys. So part of this is, Operation Dynasty or whatever we're calling it with Booth, which is what he said over and over again. We're not trying to repeat. We're trying to create a long-term window. So this is part of that. It's creating a long-term window, and it might be taking a half step back now to take a full step forward in the future. This has never worked in NBA history, but they have a plan. They're trying to make it work, which gives me some motivation because the Rockies do not have a plan. A lot of teams like the Denver Broncos seemingly have not had a plan for a long time. So the Nuggets have a plan. They know what they want to do, and they're trying to execute it. I give them some grace to see how it plays out, at least before I'm going to go full in. But that Reggie Jackson move was a giant red flag.
Okay, so you have Jokic, Jamal, and MPJ locked in through the end of the 2026-2027 season, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Gordon's locked in for how long?
Aaron Gordon's locked in the year before, so he's through 25-26. I believe Aaron is extension eligible this summer, and I believe MPJ is extension eligible at the start of training camp. So you might see some more significant commitments to the Nuggets keeping this core together later on in this offseason. But all you need to know is their core three guys are locked in through 26-27. And it's clear based off the way they've been drafting that they were preparing for a world without KCP, just based off Julian Strawther and Christian Brown being their picks. And it's clear with Peyton Watson and De'Ron Holmes that they might be preparing for that future without Aaron Gordon if they're unable to reach a favorable deal on that after the 25-26 season. So the Nuggets are doing good business in terms of their long-term plan. It's just their short-term execution, which is kind of raising some red flags.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we will see what happens. But as of right now, we have 2 MVPs here in the Mile High City because Nathan MacKinnon wins the Hart Trophy, which is so exciting. Obviously, Nikola Jokic, MVP for the NBA. Nathan MacKinnon, NHL MVP. Jake, it's the second time in history that we've seen that. The last time was Gretzky. And why is it blanking on my head right now? Yes, thank you. Thank you. So
and that's just NBA, NHL. It's happened a little bit more if you include baseball and football, but only time that they've shared an arena in those two sports, which is still awesome. And yeah, Avs PR, which did a great job last night, tweeted the amount of MVPs we've had in Denver, which has just been unbelievable if you think about it. The amount of great players we've had. We had that golden era in the late 90s, early 2000s with Larry Walker, John Elway, Terrell Davis, and then moving into Joe Sakic and Peter Forsberg. And then you go to this second golden era we've had, which has been dominated by the Avs and Nuggets. And it's just been so fun. And Nathan MacKinnon was obviously very deserving. He ran away with the award the same way Jokic ran away with his this year. So there was no doubt these two were the best players in their sport this year. Obviously, it stunk that both were out very early in the playoffs. The Avs may be a little less surprising, especially with the Val Nichushkin stuff, than the Nuggets were because of, it seemed like the Nuggets were building towards something in the second half of the season. But I think the Avs are kind of in this space, Rachel, where, you look at the amount of people that were selected to the nation's team today with Nathan and Kale and Devon and Mikko Rantanen. We've got 4 elite players. And now it's up to the Avs to, I don't want to call it a mini rebuild or even a reset, but they've got to retool around this core. And they might not be as good next year or the year after because they need to kind of rebuild around those 4 guys in order to attack these things. Hockey's this interesting sport because these guys stay in their prime for a long, long time. Aaron Ekblad and Sasha Barkov, who just won a championship for Florida, have both been there for over a decade, and they're not even 30 yet. We're going to get into that situation very soon with Cal and Nate, where they're going to be, still in their late 20s, but they will have been professional NHL players for over a decade. So Alexander Ovechkin didn't win his first title until his 30s. Sidney Crosby had a second window in his 30s. So now it's up to the Avs to kind of hunt down that second window where they build around those star players, because I don't think it's happening with the way their current roster is constructed. But it is just awesome to have a player like Nate, because that puts you in that championship contention for as long as that player is in his prime. And it's awesome to have a player like Nikola Jokic. We're going to be telling our kids or grandkids about this one day, where it's like everyone's going to be wearing Nate and Nikola jerseys the same way you walk around Mile High and they're still wearing John Elway jerseys, or last night the concert of Peyton Manning jersey.
You saw that.
I see everything, Rachel.
I was wondering. I was like, is Peyton going to come out here? And then I was like, no, he'll come out on Friday if he does it all. But I was interesting. So obviously we're talking about the Morgan Wallen concert last night, and Morgan Wallen was wearing a Peyton Manning jersey, but he wore the old school blue one. And usually they're always in the orange. And then all of the rest of like his bandmates had the new jerseys on. So I was like, oh, interesting. But yeah, it was one of those things. I'm like, hey, is Peyton going to walk out here right now? Is everybody going to freak out here in a second? Because, of course, Peyton, the Tennessee baseball connection, obviously, with Morgan Wallen, too. So, I don't know. We'll see if he pops out tonight. We have a few coworkers who are going to the concert tonight as well.
They were hanging out in Omaha last week, like you said. So,
yeah,
pretty cool. Peyton is obviously just another level of celebrity. There you go.
Morgan Wallen. There he is. I got last minute tickets.
I was at a concert with 30 people last night. It was awesome.
Nice.
Awesome. I was standing right in front of them, local Denver band. They just won Best Local Album of the Year. They're called Maybe Fern. We love our local musicians. So
where were you at?
I'm always at these local shows.
Where was it?
It was in a parking lot.
Shut up.
It was awesome, Rachel. Four girls just slaying. That's a fun little band they've got.
Love it. You were at a local concert. I was at Morgan Wallen. It was a good Thursday night, and it's going to be a good Friday to everybody. Thank you so much for hanging with us. I love the comments coming in. Good commentary, Jake. That's what Kim Baker just said to you. So I appreciate you as always. You already know that. And to everybody too in the comments, we love talking with you guys, chatting. Everybody who's saying don't get on the Klay stuff, I'm with you. I would be cool, but
I have a feeling it's going to be me and James on the show on Monday, because Sunday is when the off season starts in earnest in the NBA. So you thought yesterday was a wild ride. Buckle up for Sunday afternoon.
We will see what happens. All right, that is going to do it for today's episode of Coffee Break. Again, thank you guys so much for spending a little bit of time, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everybody.